Tonight on Primetime Politics, finding partnership with India.
We need to sign more free trade or investment agreements with some of these emerging economic powers.
The Prime Minister departs Ottawa, leading a trade mission to a country with which Canada has deep historical ties. Coming up, Andrew Thomson will walk us through what the government hopes to achieve with this trip. And foreign policy expert Vina Nadjibulla will explain why the trip has significance as countries around the world look to Canada for leadership post-Davos. Also,
we cannot allow President Trump to distract us from the work we need to do here at home.
Pierre Poilievre outlines what he's prepared to do to address the Trump threat against Canada's economy and sovereignty. Will it change public opinion about the Conservative leader? Will it change his lagging poll numbers? Our political strategists will weigh in. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. The Prime Minister is en route to India this evening, departing Ottawa earlier this morning. Now, India is just one of 3 countries the Prime Minister will visit over the next week, leading a delegation to countries in the Indo-Pacific. And when it comes to Canada and India, well, the 2 countries are looking towards inking a free trade deal. India is one of the world's largest and fastest growing economies, and the 3rd largest when it comes to purchasing power. Still, it was less than 2 years ago when India and Canada had serious diplomatic tensions that the 2 countries are now trying to put behind them, with government ministers earlier this week touting the benefits of re-establishing stronger ties.
I'll be joining the Prime Minister on the trip to India to further diversify our trade. We need to be able to open new markets, and that's exactly what we're focused on.
The Prime Minister has an aggressive agenda around the world, and he's asked me to help him in supporting that, so that's absolutely what I'm going to do.
Look at India, one of the largest economy in the world, one of the largest population. It's key for Canada to have a strategic relationship.
Well, with that, let's bring in CPAC's Andrew Thomson with more on this trip with the Prime Minister. Andrew, good to see you. You there at the foyer of the House of Commons. This trip will involve Australia and Japan, but let's begin here with the first leg, which is India, a country that Canada has a long, historic, economic, and people-to-people ties with. What is the government saying about the importance of this trip?
Well, what we're hearing about, Michael, is the importance of economic ties. Right now, India is Canada's 7th largest trading partner, and officials do believe there is room to grow as India's economy undergoes this massive expansion, that India is going to need more energy, more critical minerals, more agricultural products, and that Canada can provide these things. And when it comes to that economic focus, we do see it in the Prime Minister's agenda over the next few days. His first stop is Mumbai, which is India's financial capital. There are meetings planned with CEOs and business leaders there. Then it's on to the capital of New Delhi, where Mark Carney will again be engaging with the business world. It's also there that we expect to see a number of agreements signed with the government of India. We are expecting to see a formal launch of those Canada-India trade negotiations. And of course, Michael, we are watching for that meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Indian government says economic issues will loom large in those talks, and that it'll be a chance to continue what they call the positive momentum in the relationship.
Okay, positive momentum, although, it wasn't that long ago when the relationship between Canada and India was strained. The Hogan Commission identifying India as a source of foreign interference in this country, agents of India suspected of killing a Canadian citizen. What have government officials said about those concerns?
Well, what we're hearing this week is that perhaps foreign interference from India is not the issue it once was. This came up at the media briefing about the Prime Minister's travel this week. Officials were asked if Canada believes that Indian government agents are currently involved in extortion or threats of violence in Canada. One official answered that there's been robust diplomatic exchange with India and that they're confident that activity is not continuing. In fact, they said if they believe this activity was continuing, then this trip by the Prime Minister would probably not be happening at all. Now, there's been some pushback on this, including today from a Liberal MP, that is Sukh Dhaliwal, who says that he firmly denounces the remarks downplaying India's transnational repression, that it goes against other government assessments. We've also heard from the World Sikh Organization of Canada on this, saying that group categorically rejects the notion that India is no longer linked to violent crimes in this country. And Michael, that group also saying that the government has failed to hold India accountable.
Okay, so as you say, pushback. We'll see as to what actually happens with this trade mission to India. But after India, we know the Prime Minister will then head to Australia and Japan. Talk to us about what you're hearing from government sources about the goals the government has for those countries.
Well, let's start with what the Prime Minister had to say in Davos. Mark Carney talked about the importance of middle powers coming together, and certainly Australia and Japan are two prominent middle powers in the Indo-Pacific, prominent allies of Canada. Let's start with what we expect to see in Australia. Mark Carney will be meeting with top investment fund leaders. He'll also, on the political side, be giving an address before the Australian Parliament. He'll be meeting the Australian Prime Minister. And we're also watching to see what more we might hear about Canada-Australia defense cooperation. You'll recall that last year the two countries signed a partnership on joint over-the-horizon Arctic radar. From Australia, it's then on to Tokyo, where Prime Minister Mark Carney will meet that country's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi. And we're being told by government officials that Mark Carney is really trying to position Canada as a reliable partner for Japan's economic prosperity. And some of the key sectors he's going to be focusing on while in Japan include automotive, energy, critical minerals, and agri-food products, again, trying to broaden Canada's trade base beyond the United States.
Yeah, well, as it is, Japan automakers make 70% of cars now in Canada. Listen, Andrew Thomson, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, let's get back to the India leg of this trade mission, the first country that the Canadian delegation will visit. And to help us wrap our heads around the significance of the visit, we're now joined by Vina Nadjibulla, Vice President of the Asia-Pacific Foundation. Vina, thank you for coming by studio again.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Michael.
So even before the Prime Minister left this morning, you turned to social media and he sent out this message that India will be, and these are your words, will be Mark Carney's first opportunity to put his middle power diplomacy to the test in the region. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So Prime Minister's Davos speech received a lot of attention, including in India, wall-to-wall coverage, where there was a lot of excitement around hearing about a more pragmatic, more realism-based Canadian foreign policy, but also a recognition that the world genuinely has changed. The rupture that Prime Minister Carney spoke about, I think that there's an understanding in India about that as well. But of course, for us here in Canada, so much of our focus has been on the Euro-Atlantic relationship, on the U.S., on Europe. So it's important to see how this middle power diplomacy, how this coalition building around specific interests, how that's going to work in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, the part of the world which is the most dynamic when it comes to economic growth, to technology innovation. So it's a real opportunity to see how our Indo-Pacific strategy can now be made fit for purpose in today's moment of transition and volatility.
And here you have the Prime Minister of Canada going to the Indo-Pacific region. So does that mean then that the onus, at least for this trip, is really on Mark Carney and the Canadian delegation to show the worth of the trade and I guess a spirit of cooperation to lead middle powers?
I mean, we have a strategic opening here. This is a moment where everybody's paying attention to Canada. I myself came back from Indonesia and Singapore, and for the first time, Michael, there was a genuine excitement about Canada and what we can do with Canada. So we are trying to diversify partnerships, but so is everybody else. India is also trying to diversify its partnerships. So we have a window of opportunity here. It's great that the Prime Minister is seizing it. We can be talking about trade, but it's more than just trade and investment. It's also about building strategic partnerships around energy, around AI and technology, around talent mobility. And in the case of India, we have an ambitious agenda. We want to have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, a free trade agreement with India. And that's obviously going to take some work, and we'll see what signals we'll get from the Prime Minister, both Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Modi, about that and the timelines of that.
Okay, a few things you say there I want to pick up on. First and foremost, energy, because we saw the Energy Minister, Tim Hodgson, go to India last month, and out of those meetings, he signs with India a joint declaration on energy cooperation. Yes. Is that what India wants from Canada? Energy? Is there more? What kind of deals are you looking to perhaps be struck while this delegation is in India?
Yes, so energy, but more than just that. So let's speak about energy, because you're absolutely right. The groundwork for this prime ministerial visit was laid by our other ministers. So energy, but also AI. Minister Solomon was also there last week. When it comes to energy, I mean, there's such a synergy between what we have to offer in terms of Canada wanting to be an energy superpower and exporting our energy, both conventional as well as clean energy, not just to the US, but also to Asia. We now have the infrastructure for that through TMX pipeline, through the LNG Canada and other projects in western part of Canada, so we can get it to market. And India has so much thirst for energy. It's growing. It's the fastest growing major economy in the world. It will account for 1/3 of all of energy demand in the next 2 decades. So they need more energy. We want to have more partners to export to. And we're talking about crude oil, because also India has to diversify away from Russia. So there's the geopolitical dynamic there as well. We're also talking about, obviously, LNG in the medium term. We're talking about uranium, which will be one of the deals that we're likely to hear during this visit, a 10-year, $2.8 billion potential investment deal there. And then also critical minerals. In the medium term, I think there's so much that we can do together on critical minerals. So energy can be an area where there's deliverables in the short term, where there are things we can be doing together in the medium term. And in the long term, it kind of creates an anchoring for a sustainable economic cooperation while we negotiate the CPAC agreement.
Okay, it's interesting that you use the word anchoring, because not that long ago, we're talking about a year and a half ago, Canada-India relations were at a low point, and that had to do with the Hogan Commission saying that India was involved in foreign interference in Canada. It had to do with Indian agents being accused of perpetrating a murder in this country. And yet we hear from officials yesterday that those security concerns are no longer concerns. So how should we be approaching that aspect of the relationship? Do we actually need to be more wary of India than perhaps we're seeing right now from the federal government?
I think we absolutely need to continue to engage on the security and law enforcement track. This reset cannot be sustainable unless we make progress on that track. There are some serious issues around foreign interference, transnational repression, extremism, transnational organized crime, all of which need to be discussed in frank and serious way by our officials. I think it's good news that the National Security Advisor of India was in Canada just earlier this month, that they were able to agree on an action plan on how to deal with security and law enforcement issues. They also have agreed to put liaison officers in each other's capitals. So I take all of that, Michael, as there is now progress on this issue. India is cooperating. It doesn't mean that the issue has gone away or that we don't need to be vigilant about this, because in addition to talking to India about this, we also need to build mechanisms and legislation here in Canada to protect Canadians from foreign interference and transnational repression from India, from China, from Russia, from all the other countries. So the issue is serious, but there's now a process. I think that's what meant by the comments that have come out, that there is cooperation and a process that's moving. But in addition to that now, we also need to move forward on renewing our strategic partnership with India, on delivering some specific economic benefits to our people and businesses as well as to India. And there's a lot of that to be had, both in energy and agriculture. Premier of Saskatchewan is going to India because there's so much opportunity there. Also in technology and life sciences, Premier of New Brunswick is going because life sciences is another area, pharmaceuticals, where India can be such an important partner for Canada.
Very little time here, under 30 seconds. I want to ask though, you talk about this window of opportunity. How small is this window?
I think we need to be seizing it. So it's less about how small or big the window is. This is Canada's moment. We are being seen as a reliable, trustworthy partner. We're interested in diversifying and deepening our relations. Asia is a place where we should be looking, and this trip by Prime Minister Carney is a significant one, and we should be paying attention.
Vina, Nadjibulla, I feel like I learn so much from you every time you're here. Thank you very much.
You.
I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Well, to Toronto now, where the Conservative leader delivered a speech to the Economic Club of Canada, outlining his plans for taking on Donald Trump and building resiliency here at home. Take a listen now to a few highlights from Pierre Poilievre.
We should not declare a permanent rupture with our biggest customer and closest neighbor in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with Beijing. The President's talk of 51st statehood, whether it is a joke or not, is unacceptable. It goes without saying there is zero chance of Canada ever being a part of the United States.
Well, with that, let's bring in our political strategist. Susan Smith is co-founder and principal at Blue Sky Strategy Group. Cole Hogan is a conservative strategist. George Soule, the former NDP Director of Communications, founder and principal at On Step Strategies. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so I'll do a quick summation because, I think people got a bit of the flavor of the Pierre Poilievre speech, but of course, we can't play the whole speech for people at home right now. But he did speak issues of energy and trade, Arctic security, the U.S. relationship. But was that speech, those positions, were they distinct enough from what we've heard from Mark Carney to help the public image of the Conservative leader in terms of improving his polling numbers?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, in terms of China, I think he sort of drew a stronger line on China if people are paying attention, but no for the rest of it. I read the speech, I didn't watch all of the speech. And my thought as I was reading it was, I think Prime Minister Carney said that, what took you so long, Pierre? And also, you're the guy that went around for so long saying Canada's broken, and all of a sudden you have this newfound faith in the country. So that was part of it. I think he'll have to be saying those kinds of things for a while for people to feel that there's a big difference, because the time to have started talking about those things was when President Trump got elected, because Mr. Poilievre was the leader. Then Mr. Carney got elected, and Mr. Poilievre still wasn't talking about those things. Through his leadership review, he wasn't talking about those things because he was worried about the Jamal Javani part of the base of the party. And now that he's through his leadership review, he's suddenly starting to talk about those things. So do we need him to be talking about it? It's good for the country for those kinds of conversations, but I think people feel that the Prime Minister's got a lot of that stuff handled. Mm-hmm.
And I will get to the China statement from Pierre Poilievre in a moment, but do you pick up on this conversation as to whether or not it was distinct enough in terms of a speech? Because to Susan's point, a lot of it is what we have heard from Mark Carney this past year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would agree with Susan too, in parts where I think that there is some overlap between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre in terms of investment in the military, which I think is a good thing. And there was different speeches for different audiences. I don't think that Pierre should have talked about solely Trump at the convention in Calgary. We saw more of a emotive, high EQ speech from Poilievre in Calgary. And here we see Poilievre addressing Donald Trump and tariffs. And I would argue in terms of direct mentions, directing and addressing President Trump more directly than Carney did in Davos. And I think that what we see when we watch Pierre Poilievre take this and actually address the Canada-U.S. issue and Trump, we're seeing more of a message in terms of, just like Stephen Harper said the other week during Harperpalooza or Harperfest, that it doesn't matter much it matters less how we feel about Donald Trump and what he's doing and more about what we actually do about it.
George?
Yeah, but I think I agree with Susan on the fact that, where you've been on this. I mean, on that point at least. I mean, we saw him go out of his way to not talk about Donald Trump at all at his convention. Never mind, not a little bit. He didn't talk about him at all, which is absurd. It is the biggest existential threat to our country, literally to our sovereignty, maybe to our safety, definitely to our economy. And you had Pierre Poilievre not talking about it because there's a large chunk of his base, particularly those that were in that room at the Conservative Convention, who support Donald Trump and actually like what he's doing. And frankly, many of them who would actually be okay with becoming part of the United States if they could carve off part of wherever they live and be part of America, they'd be good with that. So he avoided that entirely until he got through his convention, and is now, realizing that Mark Carney's gotten so close to him on the other rhetoric that he might as well they can both talk about progressive conservative issues together. And I think that's where you're seeing him now. But I think Canadians will see through that. I think his caucus certainly will. That you need to have that courage as a politician to actually say the things you believe, even in hard times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you commenting in the background there, Susan.
I don't know if Carney's gone towards Poilievre, Poilievre's gone towards Carney, but what I would say is Carney has been there first, and he's been there for a very long time in terms of being able to have his finger on the pulse of how Canadians feel about the country and about how we need to handle Donald Trump and how best to approach Donald Trump. as I said, I kept reading the speech and I was like, I think the Prime Minister's been doing that. Oh, yeah, okay, great, the Prime Minister's been doing that. He had a couple of interesting potential ideas about critical minerals reserves, but there were other things that were very true Poilievre stuff, as in I'm just going to ram, my idea would be to ram a bunch of things through, very little mention, if at any, I'm not sure, of Indigenous communities and, you know, how we build that kind of thing, those kinds of partnerships in the country. And I think, quite frankly, in the summation near the end of the speech, a very naive approach to what the actual trade relationship will end up being with the United States. He's like, tariff-free trade, that's great, we all want tariff-free trade, but find me Donald Trump or anyone in his administration.
We were just told yesterday by the U.S. trade rep that tariffs will be a part of any deal.
So it's a bit naive, I think, and it looks a bit foolish on the part of Poilievre because he can't deliver, nobody can deliver that because that is Trump. And I just feel there's been such an about face in some of those statements that from a credibility perspective, he's going to have to start saying those things over and over again for a long time to people believe him, for people to believe him. I'm not sure he's capable of sustaining that.
I think we saw the proposal from Pierre Poilievre for the all-party Kuzma committee, which I think is part of the Conservatives' efforts to reach out to the Liberals and find areas on which they can cooperate and work together on. We saw that on the GST bill, the crime bill, working together on some immigration files, the major projects bill, and that is sort of the spirit of cooperation that I think we're seeing Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives say, okay, Canadians want us to work together on these things. And in his speech, Poilievre even talked about we will work together where we can, and I think we're seeing that spirit of cooperation and alignments on military investments and you know, on how we deal with Donald Trump, which I think is a good thing.
I think, sorry, Michael, just really quickly. I'm not sure how much it's about spirit of cooperation and how much it's about I don't want to go to the polls and lose.
Well, and the polling numbers are very much on the Liberal side right now, by double digits by most measures. But, you know, a lot of this speech and why it's important is, of course, Poilievre is trying to build support amongst Canadians because his numbers are lagging in terms of preferred Prime Minister, in terms of party support, double digits in both cases behind the Liberals, behind Mark Carney. But I also wonder about the need of this speeches like this to improve his standing with his own caucus, because Matt Jennedu, of course, crossed the floor last week. Matt Jennedu, we saw him getting on the plane today with the Prime Minister headed over to India in the Indo-Pacific region to be part of this trade mission. How much are efforts like this speech is about building public support? How much of it is just trying to show his caucus he has the goods to look prime ministerial to Canadians?
To change. Look, Mr. Poilievre's in trouble at the moment with his caucus. He lost one person in the early fall. He lost one person right before Christmas. He lost one person after his 87% leadership thing and Mr. Carney's speech in Davos with Matt Jennedu crossing the floor. He kind of lost Jamal Javani in Washington when he went to Washington and was spouting off on his own accord. So Mr. Poilievre has a caucus management issue, and I think you're right. Part of this is showing that he can change. I expect people came home from the Christmas break, came back to caucus and said, a lot of my constituents were okay with what Prime Minister Carney was saying in Davos. What are you doing? And he has to show that in order to be able to keep a rein on things.
Yeah, I think a couple things are true here. I think that the floor crossers didn't do so out of some deep political principle. They did so because they wanted a shortcut into government. And watching Matt Jennedu go on this junket with the Prime Minister, those are things that the sitting party in government can offer a potential floor crosser to entice them over. And I don't think I think the Liberals are smart enough to not put Matt Jennedu into cabinet anytime soon, but I think they're going to want to try to win more space, more electoral ground in Western Canada. So I'd watch for someone like that to potentially make it into cabinet after a shuffle.
Well, the numbers are tightening in Alberta, let alone the rest of the country. But in Alberta, the space between Conservatives and Liberals are tightening at this moment in time. George, what do you say? How much of this is about trying to secure his leadership amongst his own caucus?
Oh, it's all about that. And I think that part of what's happened is that, I mean, and look, I don't want to give any, no ground or favor to any of the floor crossers. Like, it's definitely a selfish, self-interested move. But it exists because the Conservatives don't have a chance of forming government anymore. And those people are seeing that. Pierre Poilievre had this massive popularity that he was born on third base and thought that he hit a home run. And really what happened was people were done with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau had moved the Liberal Party so far that there was a ton of space between the center and the far right for Pierre Poilievre to kind of grab everybody and look popular, even though really his popularity was largely based in anti-Trudeau sentiment. And now that there is a Prime Minister who's moved far over to the right of center, as a Liberal, then first of all those progressive Conservative voters and MPs feel comfortable within the Liberal Party. They feel like they have a home there, so it's a natural place to move. And Pierre Poilievre needs to now try to figure out how to be somebody he's not, to cater that more centre thing, where he's more naturally a friend to the extreme. And in Canada, you just can't do that. Our voters largely stay somewhere around the middle across the country, and so you can't cater to the extreme on one side and think that you're going to be able to form government. And his caucus is seeing that, and they're walking away.
Okay, listen, I'm going to quickly switch topics here. Very little time, but I do want to talk about the NDP. Leadership, the last leadership debate took place last week. Full disclosure, George is involved in Heather McPherson's campaign. But in that debate, not a lot of time talking about building new trade relationships, not a lot of time talking about defense and security for this country, which are very much top of mind issues for Canadians across this country. Can the NDP get relevance back in any form without tackling these issues, Susan?
Not in the short term. I can't. I mean, the debate, or I didn't see the debate, but I think the party, the leadership, and with all due respect to George and his candidate, it's not really registering. The NDP isn't registering. It's not who people are talking about, because they aren't talking about the issues that move the company writ large. They're talking about affordability. That's very important. There's no question. But putting, as George, you just said, people hang out around the middle, and I think a large chunk of the membership or the leadership candidates, not all, are on the edge. They're not in the middle. They're on the left of things, and that's not where the Canadian electorate is at this moment in time. So I think it's going to be a while, at least another electoral cycle, before the NDP are significantly relevant again.
Cool. Sure. I think it's a toss-up between Avi Lewis and Heather McPherson. I think that Avi Lewis, if he's going to win, needs to do so on the first ballot, because I don't see him being a lot of people's second choice. So I'm looking at this leadership race kind of like the 2017 Conservative Party leadership race, where Andrew Scheer, by being everyone's second choice, was able to come up the middle and win. In terms of the current media landscape and the current hot political issues, Trump, tariffs, the United States, the NDP doesn't have much space to play there. But like I've said before on the show, I hope that they're able to galvanize some public support and increase their vote count.
Because that hurts Liberals. Okay, George.
Yeah, and again, I mean, definitely, I'm anything but nonpartisan on this issue. I'm 100% behind Heather, but I will say on some of the issues that were brought up, like, look, in the last election, the question, to my mind, there were two questions, and one was, how do you feel about Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister, and the other one was, who can deal with Donald Trump? And the NDP wasn't the answer to either one of those questions. Not the positive one anyway. And so that does need to shift. I think, I'm not sure if it's good news to say, but we have actually been talking, and we at the campaign, all the campaigns to some extent, have been talking about Trump and some of these other issues. But again, they're not getting a whole lot of coverage because there's 7 seats in the House, and it's hard for us to regain that kind of larger position in the dialogue. And so it is going to be incumbent on the candidates to talk more about those issues and punch through a little better. I'm finding the urge to not lay out Heather's platform on some of these issues, but just to say that I think that's what's got to happen. We need to make sure that we are the answer, at least to more Canadians, for the main questions in the election. And I will say this, that one of the things that came up in the debate was, what does the next election look like? And while Jagmeet stood up at the beginning of the 2025 election and said he's running for Prime Minister, 4 of the 5 candidates, so Tony McQuail being the outlier, all said that the next campaign for the NDP is about rebuilding. Like, we're not running for Prime Minister the next time. We're all 4 of the 5 candidates are honest about that. And that's what it's got to be. It's got to be about, where can we find the support to rebuild some ground so we have a base from which we can build again.
But there might even be a few more bricks to fall, right? 7 seats currently in the House. Alexandre Boulouris, the lone Quebec MP, may go and run for provincial politics. He hasn't denied that he's thinking about that, so you guys could be down another seat. And then the MP from Nunavut, I think, is a bit waffly too about whether she's going to stay in caucus.
Quick response.
Well, whoever wins this race, there's a lot of work ahead of us for sure. Like, there's no question that this is going to be even more work for the winner than this campaign's been. Once they're the leader, it's a lot more work ahead of us for sure. But I do think that there's some hope there, and so that's the challenge that will be for whoever wins.
Okay, that is our time. If you missed the NDP debate, Susan Smith, you can watch it on CPAC.ca. Susan, Cole, George, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Thursday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.